A warm welcome to all of you who have chosen to tune in today. The focus of this short reflection is on the Gospel according to John for the solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ the King. The Gospel follows. Pilate said to Jesus, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this on your own, or have others told you about me?" Pilate answered, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom does not belong to this world. If my kingdom did belong to this world, my attendants would keep fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not here." So Pilate said to him, "Then you are a king." Jesus answered, "You say I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." The Solemnity of Christ the King is celebrated on the last Sunday of the liturgical year and is the culmination of the liturgical year. It's important because it provides us with a focus on the end times, as we believe that as Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. Next Sunday is the beginning of the season of Advent, and we begin yet another Paschal mystery journey through another liturgical year. Each year at this time, we begin and end the same journey. Endings and beginnings give us an opportunity to assess where we are on our faith journey and to make any needed tweaks to keep us on that right track. Presumably, we have progressed in our faith journey now that we are 1 year older. By way of background, Pope Pius XI instituted the Feast of Christ the King in his 1925 encyclical letter, Quas Primas. And while the encyclical that established this feast was addressed to Catholic bishops, Pope Pius XI wanted this feast to impact the laity. And following is the significance for the faithful. The faithful, moreover, by meditating upon these truths, will gain much strength and courage, enabling them to form their lives after the true Christian ideal. If to Christ our Lord is given all power in heaven and on earth, if all men purchased by his precious blood are by a new right subjected to his dominion, if this power embraces all men, it must be clear that not one of our faculties is exempt from his empire. He must reign in our minds, which should assent with perfect submission and firm belief to the revealed truths and to the doctrines of Christ. He must reign in our wills, which should obey the laws and precepts of God. He must reign in our hearts, which should spurn natural desires and love God above all things and cleave to him alone. He must reign in our bodies and in our members, which should serve as instruments for the interior sanctification of our souls, or to use the words of the Apostle Paul, as instruments of justice unto God. Bottom line is that Jesus must reign in our minds, he must reign in our wills, he must reign in our hearts, he must reign in our bodies and in our members. These words from Pope Pius XI prompt some questions for us. Does Christ the King reign in our minds, in our wills, in our hearts, bodies, and in our members? To answer that question, self-appraisal is needed. And to answer that question and the questions that follow in this reflection, now is the time to assess our personal relationship with Jesus, our King, that we've had during this past year. The following story underscores the need for and the value of self-reflection in more down-to-earth terms than those used by Pope Pius XI. His words and the following story together make a strong case for self-appraisal. And here is the story. Two veterans visited the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C. With tears in their eyes, they touched the names of their brothers with whom they served in Southeast Asia and with whom they were imprisoned by the Viet Cong. As they left the memorial, one of the ex-POWs asked the other, "Have you forgiven your captors yet?" "No, never," the friend replied. His buddy paused for a moment, looked behind him again at the wall, and said, "Then it seems as if they still have you in prison, don't they?" Two differing viewpoints. One was unable to forgive. The other recognized the need for forgiveness and courageously shared this with his buddy, and he shared it to help him move on from his personal prison of hatred and vengeance. And I don't know if this brief exchange between these two guys led to a change of heart, but it certainly did provide for an opportunity for self-appraisal. I think this brief encounter can help us because with the Feast of Christ the King, we too are given an opportunity for self-appraisal. Self-appraisal will help us know if we will be ready when we are called to go out to meet the Lord when we die. We don't know when exactly this will be, and we usually don't even think about it. But now is the time to assess our personal relationship with Jesus, our King, that we've had during this past year by asking this question: when have we given ourselves over for the good of others as Jesus did for us? At our baptism, we are oriented to look forward to a lifelong faith journey ending with our embrace by the Lord. And along this journey, we need to pay attention to ways that help us keep the proper focus on God. To this end, the Feast of Christ the King is a key part of our ongoing efforts to prepare for our meeting with the Lord. The Gospel for this Sunday includes several references to King and Kingdom. Now, when we hear the words King and Kingdom, what comes to mind? Well, we might think of some of the following: power, wealth, crown, throne, scepter, rich and fancy-looking robes, power, multiple attendants, self-serving rule over territory. And we would think of these things because a king wears a crown. He sits on a throne, wears rich and fancy robes, and holds a scepter as a sign of the power that he has over his subjects. But Jesus had no power or wealth. His crown was of thorns. His throne was a cross, and his rule was suffering and death. His kingdom did not belong to this world. He was born and came into the world to testify to the truth. Jesus was known by many to be a powerful preacher, teacher, and healer who cast out demons and worked miracles. Many followed him and loved him. Others were bothered by his popularity, felt threatened by him, and tried to embarrass him. Jesus is the humble, obedient servant of God who consistently refused any demonstration of power for himself, but manifested the power of God only for the faith and healing of the poor, the troubled, the lost, and the rejected. Jesus demonstrates his kingship. He demonstrates his kingship not by saving himself, but by saving others. Eventually, he was arrested, imprisoned, tortured, nailed to a cross, and left to die with a criminal crucified on each side of him. A cross is where we least expect a king to be. Jesus' crucifixion is a hopeless depiction. Jesus, the generous teacher and loving healer, is hung on a tree like a common criminal. He's the subject of scorn and derision by the very people he came to serve and save. He gave himself up for our good and to give us hope. His suffering, death, and resurrection made it possible for us to look forward to the promise of everlasting life at the end of our lifelong faith journey. This is a great gift for which we need to say thank you. And more importantly, to show our thanks by choosing to use it for the good of others. In one of his last breaths, Jesus offered peace and healing to a criminal hanging there with him. Such is the transforming and redemptive love of Christ. This is how God's kingdom is established and where our discipleship begins. Self-appraisal helps us to change and grow so that this liturgical year will be better than all the ones that came before it. More questions for this self-appraisal follow. Would we be like the thief crucified with Jesus who wishes Jesus to abuse his power and save himself and them? Or would we be like the thief who recognizes his own sinfulness and Jesus' goodness? The good thief recognized the grave injustice that was taking place. In recognizing the innocence and goodness of Jesus, the good thief was able to see and accept responsibility for his own sinfulness and his need for forgiveness. The veteran who forgave his captors, he recognized the need for healing and experienced peace, but his buddy, who did not, remained in a prison of vengeance. We are called to claim Christ as our King, to recognize the need for healing and peace in our lives in order to shift the focus from ourselves to an ever deeper devotion to Christ the King. We are also called to invite and allow God to reign in our minds, to reign in our wills, to reign in our hearts, to reign in our bodies, and in our members. From the crosses and crucifixions of our world, the reign of God takes shape when we respond by making a clear, conscious decision to strive to imitate the humble selflessness of Christ. In this way, we can bring about the spirit of hope and reconciliation into the lives of those around us. The reign of God takes shape when we strive to imitate the humble selflessness of Christ by loving and being servants of the poor in the way and in the spirit with which Jesus served them while he was on earth. The reign of God takes shape when we strive to imitate the humble selflessness of Christ and oppose and reject violence in all its forms. The reign of God takes shape when we strive to imitate the humble selflessness of Christ and we make his vision of compassion, peace, and justice the compass for our journey through this life to the life of the world to come. Each year at this time, we end one liturgical year and begin another as we continue on our faith journey. Endings and beginnings give us an opportunity to assess where we are on our faith journey and to make the needed tweaks to keep us on the right track. Presumably, we've progressed in our faith journey now that we are 1 year older. Now is a time for self-reflection, a time to assess our personal relationship with Jesus, our King, that we've had during this past year. The fullness of life offered by Jesus cannot be provided by power or money. It comes only by giving ourselves over for the good of others, as Jesus did for us. Jesus modeled such self-giving when, on the cross, he responded to the good thief's cry for compassion and mercy. While we don't encounter someone dying on a cross asking for compassion and mercy every day, we do meet, for example, the tired parent with the fussy, grumpy child, the bulky teen. We may meet a frustrated coworker or an out-of-work person stressing about how they will pay their bills, or an elderly parent who calls you to tell you they have no food when you know that you just filled up their refrigerator. I'm sure you can think of other examples like this. But here is where we encounter Christ, our King, and that is in the face of others in need. Here is where we are really kings and queens. That is when we help others. And so to help complete our end of the year self-appraisal, here are the last questions I can offer for reflection. First, how well do we imitate Jesus when we respond to the needs of others? And when have we given ourselves over for the good of others as Jesus did for us? Think about these last two questions as well as the other questions that were posed earlier in this reflection. Take time to pray about them. And in doing so, may we be enabled to develop an ever deeper devotion to Christ, our King, so that He will reign in our minds, He will reign in our wills, He will reign in our hearts, He will reign in our bodies and in our members. And then we can make His vision of compassion and justice the compass for our journey through life to the life of the world to come. And may God bless each one of our efforts, because they will truly continue to be pleasing to God.